Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Onchain India podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Vijay from Eclipse team. Eclipse is making a lot of waves. I think, most recently the mainnet, is out there. And there are, a lot of, quite good rumors that, token is also going to launch in, upcoming days or months. So we'll deep dive, everything about Eclipse today. So first of all, Vijay, welcome to this Onchain India podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks a lot for having me, Pratik.
Awesome. Vijay, let's start with your background. I think you have had an interesting journey with Uniswap, DYDX. I think you have seen the the user curve into the Web3. Right from uh, when there's a lot of DeFi apps were getting popular and stuff. But before entering into it, what was thought process? What was that attractive model for you? Especially coming into the Web3.
Yeah, so I jumped into the crypto space in 2015. I was previously working on Wall Street as an investor at BlackRock, and crypto was still very kind of nascent at that time. So you had a handful of products out there, right? And it was Bitcoin, Ripple, Litecoin, Doge, and then you were starting to see like the Ethereum pre-sale happened. I think shortly after that. So a very different time for the industry, right? Where I think it was much more kind of basic evangelism focused in terms of educating people and really trying to define values and navigate kind of how to drive adoption, right? Was institutional the right strategy? Was just going purely out to retail the right strategy? And I think the latter is definitely proving out now. But back then it was like a kind of this uncertain mix, right? And people were doing like Coinbase started out as like a merchant, a payment for merchant services platform where storefronts could basically accept Bitcoin for payments. So it was like very different time. But a very interesting time too, right? And I think what attracted me to it was really this interesting combination of financial markets, technology, and the legal and social coordination piece. And I knew a lot about the first piece, and was very curious about the second two. And crypto is just like a single substrate that kind of ties all three of those together. So that's what I found just very intellectually interesting, right? And then the potential of actually driving efficiencies or just access in the real world and these like basic values that people kind of accept now. But I think since then the app space, the thing that's really excited me is like being able to bring in very high performant systems and apps and kind of consumer experiences to a broad base of users. And I think what's interesting about the crypto app space more broadly now, of course, DeFi has been around for a long time. Right now, I was building at Uniswap and DYDX there, and kind of the early heydays of Ethereum DeFi. But I think now, the app space has gotten like broader and larger, right? And it's really interesting to see kind of the different types of app archetypes that we're seeing and like the insanely high revenue per user kind of type dynamics that you see in the most successful apps too, which sometimes is short-lived, right? Like the friend text of the world, fantasy tops, and so on. But a lot of times too, it's quite sustained with the pumped out funds of the world.
No, absolutely. I think the interesting point of a lot of people coming on to the Web3 is also this decentralization and sort of permissionless sort of an aspects, which naturally drives them loving the entire ecosystem and just the freedom to go and launch over things. Coming from there, Vijay, I think Eclipse is positioned in a very, very different way, right? I mean, even when we first heard it, like Ethereum on Solana and making some splash waves, I think you guys have raised tons of money. I think north of 65 mil, have some tier one VCs on board and stuff. How was that thought process on positioning, and I know it has been slightly adverse as per the market, but as we look down specifically in 2025 with all these attractive things coming on the way, how does this positioning do you feel will help you guys in this year?
Yeah. So Eclipse in a nutshell is Solana on Ethereum, right? So we're bringing the speed and performance capabilities of Solana through the Solana VM with the liquidity and network effects of Ethereum, because Eclipse settles to Ethereum as a rollup. And then we're using Celestia for data availability and publishing data. So as a result, Eclipse is able to offer a highly performant and high TPS, or transactions per second, but also a very low cost and efficient infrastructure for developers to build apps. And in terms of really positioning that early on, right, Eclipse actually got started doing a lot of app specific rollups, and building a more general purpose SVM based scaling solution for Ethereum was something that was more contrarian when we first kind of set out in that direction about a year and a half ago at this point. Because a lot of the app specific rollups we were seeing app developers come to Eclipse for tended to be more EVM based, right? And we sort of saw the overhead of running a lot of these app specific rollups, and kind of the limitations that you still ran into. And we felt being able to build something that can truly support the needs of 99% of apps out there, even as they kind of hit that point of parabolic velocity, and have all those apps continue to coexist in the same environment, right? That was really important, right? Because that goes back to the values of shared liquidity, transparency, composability that have driven a lot of the boom in DeFi and Web3. And so we wanted to preserve that while also being able to still support very high throughput at very low cost, right? So you can build these game-changing app experiences like high throughput central ledger order books, or highly financialized consumer apps, which is another area that we're highly focused on, and of course is seeing broader interest now with SocialFi and Solana. But we wanted to really be able to support all these apps in one place. And so this stack is what we felt was kind of the best stack from first principles, right? Because it offers the best of each of these considerations I just talked about. And at the time, it was actually a pretty contrarian bet, right? Because Solana, of course, was, the market was in a very different place. Solana was in a very different place, not nearly as much awareness or adoption as there is now. And most people were still talking about EVM. But the SVM can support multiple app hotspots without congesting the network, right? So that's a very powerful concept. You can also do things with local fee markets, and the design of this Solana VM can tap into hardware improvements and drive to much higher throughput over time, right? So that's what we're seeing with Firedancer and then Eclipse. At Eclipse, we just published our technical roadmap yesterday, and that illustrates how we're going to eventually go beyond that as well, because an L2 can really lean into hardware improvements because of the sequencer architecture. So, that's kind of a longer way of saying that the Eclipse architecture is something that myself and the team really intended to support this next wave of like apps that essentially are reaching Web 2 scale, right? So having Web 2 scale, but on Web 3 and with the user base and distribution of Web 3.
Got it. Since you mentioned about the architecture, Vijay, I also wanted to ask, since I think you've seen some very highly, consumer sort of applications like DYDX, over your stint over there. The two aspects to it. One is, specifically on the customer onboarding, when they try out this different set of whole chain together, and obviously, everyone has got some pros and cons. But what was your pattern, in the last, few years of observing where is this ultimately headed to, and what is the winning recipe, specifically for customers, to try out the chain? And the sub part to that question, Vijay, is specifically from the developer onboarding, right? Because I think this has been an important issue. while because developers, these days, I think having like tons of opportunities to build around, they need to obviously find and fit, where their dApp, could get like a lot of liquidity, or where they could get like tons of users, or where they would be loved, in that sense. So there are multiple parameters. So I'd love to understand from your lens, in the last 5 to 6 years, how has this changed, and what do you feel for 25, it's gonna go?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about that for the infrastructure layer and the app layer is a little bit different, right? Where with the infrastructure layer, you're really catering to developers, right? But you're still ultimately catering to their users as well. So for developers, though, when you're thinking about what infrastructure to deploy on, you want to look for something that has a combination of technical features that enable the app experience that you're trying to build, and that also offer you aligned distribution and community, right? So using Eclipse as an example, we really cater to these highly performant use cases, and that caters towards things like central limit order books, highly financialized consumer apps that can see extremely high throughput in a short period of time, like the Turbo Tap game that launched on Eclipse recently. And that's an example of like the type of consumer app that we really, and consumer app developer that we really want to encourage. And so that's kind of the use case and broader developer archetype that we have catered to in terms of technical features and roadmap, and who we're really speaking to. And so we've tended to see a good amount of kind of product market fit with those types of developers. And then I think the other piece I mentioned is aligned distribution, right? So is the user base and community on that chain aligned with the type of user base that a developer wants to cater to as well, right? I think Solana is like the most kind of salient example of this, with the alignment with meme coin users, traders, issuers. And so I think really cultivating that community and like a unique community is something that we're focused on at Eclipse. And it's very interesting that NFTs have taken off in a big way on Eclipse, even though they're not necessarily something that's come roaring back in this current stage of the bull market. And so we're starting to see like this unique community, and so I think leaning into that and fostering that is important, right? And that also kind of goes hand in hand with this user that is very interested in consumer apps or highly financialized games that are launching on Eclipse, right? So there's also that user-based alignment. So I think as a developer, you want to pay attention to both those things. And then in terms of so that's to your question about developer onboarding, right? Talking about the user piece, right? And ultimately, this is all for users, so I think it's important for both front end apps to think about this. But in terms of users, I think the like UX has to be seamless and easy to use, right? I think that's one of the biggest lessons from the most successful apps out there, right? Is they've really focused on efficient, easy UX that really catered to the target user kind of archetype, right? So Uniswap did a great job of this. DYDX, we thought a lot about kind of the trader archetype that we were catering to. And then even with Friendtech, which wasn't kind of the simplest experience, like it was very much, the experience was great for the type of target user they wanted to encourage, right? And then if you look at in the latest kind of meme coin meta, Pump.Fun, and a lot of the apps that have taken off have really focused on this point, right? And accessibility. So I think that's always important to think about, right? But then I think beyond that, it's kind of keeping a pulse to both the crypto Twitter piece, but because crypto Twitter is definitely an important part of the industry, but then also paying attention to what kind of resonates or reaches some escape velocity outside of that kind of echo chamber as well, right? Because for example, the Jelly Jelly meme coin that launched yesterday had 20K holders, and definitely hit a point of kind of distribution into the Web2 audience too, given the Venmo founder is involved, right? And so part of that I think is like, who's involved, what's the user base and community like, but then part of it can also be driven buy the product, and really kind of thinking about that. So, I'd say overall, like, consumers definitely, I think, has been and will continue to be a big part of the cycle, but there's many other things and use cases that there's a lot of room for improvement and continuing to build and iterate. And so I think just really catering to that user archetype and thinking through UX and DevX is very important.
Got it. I think coming to the developers part, right, Vijay, and specifically a lot of young audience, who are very passionate about the whole crypto scene, and while we are interacting as well, we find, I think, these folks. I mean, the first job is going to be in the Web3, so they're all very excited about the charming, the entire industry, a lot of, crazy things happening, a lot of prize movements happening around and stuff. But in all these things, I mean, the core part of an entrepreneurship, or, specifically for early stage founders, right, who want, to launch, or, who want to go ahead and execute their ideas. Uh, it's often a bit of challenging, in these environments, because you're stuck with, hey, which idea to choose to, with say multiple 1B or C, sort of different things coming in. So what would be your advice, specifically for these early stage founders, developers, on how do they choose, or how do they finalize on that particular concept?
Yeah, it's a great question in terms of where to and how to narrow in, right? I think the most important thing I'd say is, like, do you enjoy using it, right? So build for yourself first. Obviously that can be taken to an extreme as well, but I think it's important, 'cause especially in crypto and Web3, there's a deep tie between the builders and users, right? And a lot of the builders are among the most active users, and vice versa. A lot of users end up becoming builders. So there's this kind of industry in-group dynamic where if you're plugged into crypto Twitter and paying attention to what apps see kind of spikes in adoption and upward trend lines, like, that'll give you a sense. And if as a developer, like, you really enjoy the space, being in the space, or what it enables, like, these ideas will start to naturally come to you. And then I think it's about honing in on, okay, what is, like, you can test things out with smaller kind of circles of people, right? These could be other developers, partners, friends. I think it's also interesting to see people who are totally unfamiliar with crypto and how they react to it. But I think really just dog fooding things, because the pace of innovation and ability to ship is so quick. It's quick in general now, especially with AI and code generation, but it's even quicker in Web3 because you also have this open source code base, and it's like each layer stacks on top of everything that came before it. And so you can just constantly test and iterate, right? The timeline to bringing product to market is so short. Obviously, you want to bring good product to market, but I think really just dogfooding things and getting it out there and testing is the best way to kind of iteratively figure that out, and making sure that you enjoy it, and something that you're passionate about too. Because there's so many, like, there's so many mini app ideas. There's so many, there's also so many versions of each of these things out there, right? So in order to really stand out, it's got to bring something uniquely new to the table, right? That could be with UX, that could be with a gameplay dynamic, that could be with an underlying kind of infrastructure enabled improvement like throughput, and then also marketing and participating in kind of the stories and discussions and narratives on crypto Twitter is also very much an important part of building out a successful Web3 product as well.
Got it. I think staying passionate and chasing what you really love, I think can really take things. And obviously,
Totally.
One good thing about Web3 is I think we have a lot of supportive actors out there. I mean, Twitter just posted around, or TG or Discord. I think one really good thing is there's not this hierarchical system, like in Web2, where you have to go through multiple stages or something like that. So I think it's really, really interesting time, and I mean, so much flexibility out there, for
Totally.
these guys. Yeah. The follow-up question to this, Vijay, is I think specifically in these markets, fundraising is one sort of a huge daunting task for early stage founders, and I think it is being questioned with few of the recent launches in last few weeks, where you have no VCs, nothing, you just launch and give out to community and stuff. But still, like for few developers or for few projects, it is very essential that they get the initial hand holding support, or they get this sort of thing. And sometimes what happens is, since it's a small community, you need to go via ref checks, or you need to go into a proper channel to get their attention and something. So what would be your advice to such founders who are in the process of raising their probably their first stage, first round? And a follow-up question to that is, we also have a lot of founders who have raised like seed or pre-seed sort of thing, and now they're going towards the Series A part, which is obviously pretty interesting, because you're raising the valuations, the amount is high, and then obviously there are very, very few backers in this whole market. So what would be the strategy for those folks as well?
Yeah, in terms of fundraising, so I think the strategy for pre-seed and seed versus Series A and B can be quite different, right? Because pre-seed and seed is very much, it's almost so early that it's really a bet on the person and team and their ability to kind of adapt and to build out something with product market fit and iterate, right? It's a lot about that 0 to 1 stage. Sometimes in crypto, the Series A and B can also still be in that, and of course, you're still making a bet on the founder and team, and the team behind the product. But it's like a slightly different consideration at that stage as well, right? Because there may just be more metrics and kind of adoption that investors are paying attention to with the Series A and B. So I think with pre-seed and seed, it's often helpful to get one or two kind of major like angel type investors involved, right, as kind of like a way to get network effects going with the broader round. But also, I think the threshold for doing a good pre-seed or seed for a team that has potential has really come down in crypto, right? Which is great for developers and founders and teams, because the market is very responsive and reactive, right? And I've seen a lot of seed deals, even like the past few weeks, that have closed extremely quickly, right? With an idea that has potential, a good team. The good team part is the most important thing. A good team with a vision, right? But also recognizing at the pre-seed and seed, you may have to adapt that. But I think you could reach out to, there's a variety of different archetypes, right? There's like angel investors from Web2, which may require kind of more reference checks or connections. Of course, there's like seed venture firms, which may be in a similar camp, right? And then there's kind of like the individual, like angels, like the crypto Twitter, kind of the major accounts on crypto Twitter, a lot of whom invest. And the thing I'd say to pre-seed and seed founders raising is, don't if you're having a hard time getting in contact with somebody, don't be afraid to try Twitter DMs. Like that is completely, become table stakes, I think, for founders being willing to message on Twitter, right? And just reach out and ask. And, worst case, there's no response, but Twitter and Telegram have really democratized access for the people on there. But, when going to Web2, or if you're looking for kind of someone who has, call it a traditional track record, then being able to back channel and go through connections is important, right? And I think doing that is, if you have an idea with good potential and a good team, then it's more about just connecting the dots, right? Seeing how many degrees of separation separate you from the person you're trying to get into contact with, right? And then the last thing I'll add on that too is, I think the fundraising environment is rapidly changing, right? And of course, we've had prior iterations of this, like with ICOs in 2019, 2020, but I do think it is sustainably changing for the better in terms of kind of providing a lot of different avenues to raise capital for good projects, right? So if you look at things like Echo and Legion, they're kind of almost a little bit of a return to that ICO model with some slight tweaks. But this idea of being able to do a token sale on these platforms, TokenSoft, Echo, Legion, CoinList, Republic. So there's a variety of different approaches to it, but they've really helped provide additional avenues to developers depending on what they want to achieve, right? I think the market even like rewards this more in many cases these days because it's community aligned, right? And then of course you have like the meme coin kind of launch meta, the idea of fair launches. So a variety of different things to think about here. And then to your point on Series A and B, it's I think there it's you can also do community centric rounds at that stage. And again, I think the environment has rapidly changed even from a year ago. But then there, I'd say a decent chunk of founders still want a venture firm to come in there, and of course, venture firms have capital at scale, right, and additional expertise. So I think there it's if you do go that avenue, it's about catering the pitch to that type of audience, right, and highlighting the things they care about, like metrics and growth and roadmap and adoption. But I think the most important thing across all these audiences is people are getting hit with deals or asks left and right in crypto, right? Twitter, Telegram, Discord, Slack, everything is always just constantly popping off with notifications. So I think always thinking about how can you capture attention and interest in a very kind of strong attention grabbing way is super important, right? Regardless of what you're doing. So thinking about that, thinking about the format, keeping things short and concise and very focused on key inputs, key outputs. I think using that as a North Star can definitely help a lot.
Amazing. I think this will be very helpful, to a lot of folks, who are into that phase, and hopefully we see some success stories, coming out there. One last question, Vijay, is obviously, 2025 is all going to be super exciting. The kind of turnaround which it had in the last 2 or 3 months is just phenomenal. I think both on the regulations part and the sort of new sort of Web2 people who are eager to come here. I was just chatting with one of the largest exchanges here in India, and they mentioned the volume is back to the 21 peak, and despite with all the taxation and all the bad things out there. So people are really excited to go out, try what's happening on all this on-chain activity, and then be a part of it. And it's interesting time for our developers and founders as well, because there is like so much exciting things to be built for new sort of audience and the new upcoming ones. On top of your mind, what would be the top 2 or 3 ideas or something which which you think can really pick up in this environment?
Yeah, it feels like 2025 has already been so much longer than it's actually been, right? We're 1 month into the year. It felt like half a year almost with everything that's happened, right? Both in terms of market as well as regulations and macro, and then AI on top of that, brightening the convergence of crypto and AI. So, I think a lot to navigate. I think in terms of things to lean into, right? So one is, I'd say, the consumer space is going to continue to be super exciting, right? And I think there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening. We'll see how sustainable this kind of Web2 entry of developers is, right? In terms of even yesterday, like the Venmo founder launching a meme coin, and these are very interesting, high potential signals, but how things materialize, it's just so unpredictable. So I think staying nimble, but really paying attention to the market and what's resonating at a deep kind of user level, and looking at activity, what's been the distribution of successful products or tokens. And so I think that's one, and that's just kind of, staying agile. And then two is I think the convergence of AI and crypto is definitely it's super messy. It's like, there's great examples, bad examples. Some things lean more in the direction of pure meme coin. Other things are much more like pure AI, and maybe the token piece is a secondary consequence. But I think that's going to continue to be a super interesting space, right? And you're combining kind of the rapid pace of crypto innovation plus the rapid pace of AI innovation, right? And so DeepSeek kind of obviously had a huge impact on markets, including crypto markets, as soon as it came out, right? But how sustainable is that? Where do things go from here? But I think that kind of space will continue to be super interesting. And then third is financialized consumer, and that's a app space that Eclipse is making a big bet on. And I think more broadly, it's we're in the era where everything is getting financialized or gamified, right? And um, that type of behavior is almost inevitable in terms of where things are going, right? You look at Robinhood adding futures, prediction markets, sports betting. It's just almost the inevitable like drive as a society towards that too. And so ensuring we have great products for users to safely engage in those things and in ways that kind of match their risk profile is important, right? Because right now too, it feels inevitable that things are going in that direction, but also, in prior cycles too, like there have been times where people think, okay, this is the future, and then things go too far, right? And when kind of this casino aspect of financialization is introduced, there's also risks and downside being introduced, right? and so I think just being very mindful of that and building products that can sustainably tap into that interest and potential is important, right? And part of this is just broader risk for the space, but then I think part of it developers can really impact in terms of their product design and what mechanics or user kind of activities it relies on. But I think the financialized consumer space is hugely interesting this year as well. And then I'm excited to see what kind of innovations or kind of metas people move towards in terms of token launches itself, right? Because I think the industry as a whole has now acknowledged that the token is a core part of every kind of app ecosystem, community, infra. And so again, I think just sustainably tapping into that dynamic is another big opportunity.
Amazing. Thanks, Vijay, for sharing these ideas, and hopefully, we see a few of them picked up, and at least experiment in this and then go big. It was really exciting to talk about Eclipse, the journey, and obviously a lot of inspirational stuff for our young developers and founders audience. And we wish Eclipse the best, and hopefully we'll see it rocking in 2025. Any last message for the community or founders who are looking to build on Eclipse?
Yeah. So if you guys are interested in building on Eclipse, would love to chat. Also happy to chat or connect, even if not. But yeah, I'd say in terms of what's interesting to us at Eclipse, it's definitely things in kind of this broader consumer space. I was talking about developers who want to build high throughput financial apps as well. So if what you're building requires scale, throughput, and low cost, Eclipse is definitely a good fit for that. And then in terms of just broader advice, I'd say, things are moving very quick now, so stay plugged in, but also kind of like keep a longer term horizon on things too, right? I think in crypto that there's always like the next week horizon, and then there's like the next year horizon, right? And so balancing out those two things, especially as a builder, is very important. And yeah, I'm super excited to hopefully make it to India this year as well, and attend some meetups and host some events. And you guys are doing great work, so excited to connect with you guys.
Thanks a lot, Vijay.